And welcome to all of our attendees this week for another edition of Webinar Wednesday. Judging from the high percentage of industrial employers that we had register to either be on this webinar or to receive the link afterwards, we can tell that this is a very, very hot topic. We're going to dive in by looking at it this way. I was looking at this article just last week in Industry Week. I think this was published on, there it is, September 24th, so Thursday of last week, and talking about renewing the case for career and technical education. Let's look at what they came up with. They said, over the past 6 months, society has undertaken lifestyle and work changes that only a once-in-a-century event like COVID could inspire. It talks about the fact that online retail has stepped up the years-long displacement of in-store shopping. We're no stranger to that. Many small restaurants and bars, community treasures around the country have gone out of business. Hotels and airlines overhauling their business models to meet the demands of post-COVID travelers. The article goes on to talk about manufacturing and how it's been affected on a massive scale, saying that significant supply chain disruptions and further decoupling of the Chinese and US economies are expediently transforming factory floors. Saying that if there's a silver lining, some analysts are saying that manufacturers are achieving 5 years of innovation in just 18 months. And then going on to say that American manufacturers that were struggling to attract enough employees with the appropriate skills to keep their increasingly tech-savvy factories operating are continuing to see that problem. Even amid a slow recovery from the spring economic collapse, there are still 400,000 jobs available in manufacturing. So sectors like retail and hospitality are seeing decreases in employment, but manufacturing still needs 400,000 people. So that led to this question: can the product of that first problem be the solution to the other one? In other words, can the fact that we are seeing decreases in retail and hospitality employment be part of the solution to the shortage of people that remains in the world of manufacturing? For more on that topic, let's talk a little bit about the similarities between manufacturing and some of those other sectors. Last week on our webinar, we talked about the 7 deadly wastes and how identifying these deadly wastes in any process, manufacturing or otherwise, is a great way to improve the throughput, to improve the efficiency of that process. You know, I used to travel all over the country teaching Kaizen and continuous improvement. And one of the very first things we did when we wanted people to understand lean manufacturing was we took a field trip. We called it the $5 Lean Primer. And we would go and see a cutting edge, innovative training program where the registration fee was only $5. A made to order lunch included in that $5 in an air conditioned classroom close to your office or close to your manufacturing plant. And there we demonstrated a production line where every single order is custom and customer lead times are literally less than 5 minutes. Now think about for a moment where that might have been. Where would that $5 lean primer have been delivered? And if you're thinking about it like I did, you realize that we actually did that $5 lean primer at Subway. That's right. We would take a group of people that we wanted to teach about lean manufacturing and take them to Subway and have them look at every single lean practice they saw in place at Subway. Think about it. At Subway, every single order is 100% custom. Every unit is made one at a time. Materials are located at exactly their point of use. If I need the tomatoes, they are right there when I need them. Same thing for the bread, same thing for the cucumbers. Single direction flow. Product never flows backwards. It starts at the beginning of the process and there's no waste as far as the motion or transportation of the product moving in the other direction. It is 100% standardized. It doesn't matter if I go to the Subway across the street from my office in Mequon, Wisconsin, or near our office in Minneapolis, Minnesota, or near our office just outside of Detroit, Michigan. Everything at Subway is standardized and done exactly the same way. Work areas are kept clean. As soon as there's a slowdown in the line, you'll see the people working at Subway starting to clean up their work area. All of the equipment is at the point of use. When I need the knife, it's right there for me to cut the sandwich. Tools are returned to the same location every time. Wait time is used effectively. So Subway is a great way to see lean manufacturing practices in action. If Subway systems are such a great way to teach lean manufacturing. Maybe porting people from fast food who are used to those types of systems into manufacturing isn't such a big stretch. You know, we've been talking a lot this year about how many of the things we see in manufacturing, like Kaizen and standardized quality, like ISO 9000 or QS or TS, safety, where we rely on OSHA for many of our regulations, sensors out on the edge of our networks that are monitoring manufacturing devices and manufacturing processes, and the systems themselves, control systems in the fog, CRM systems like Salesforce and Sugar, integrated management systems, and data analytics are alive and well in manufacturing. And then we talk about how we can look at this continuum from the sensors all the way to the enterprise level, all the way to continuous improvement, and how that process repeats itself across industry sector after industry sector, in healthcare, in distribution, yes, in retail, yes, in fast food, in transportation, and in other sectors of our economy. The truth of the matter is the difference between some of these sectors like fast food and retail and hospitality, the processes there aren't a whole lot different than the processes that we use in manufacturing. The equipment, the technology, how we maintain that equipment, how we manage inventory, for instance, in a retail environment, on-time delivery, delivering orders when the customer needs them, lean processes, leadership, and customer service. Those are all things that are staples of retail, fast food, and hospitality. So if subway systems are such a great way to teach lean manufacturing, maybe porting people from fast food to manufacturing isn't such a big stretch. If, and this is a big if we can help them quickly add the necessary skills and the necessary competencies. When it comes to talking about how we do that, I can think of no better guest than my friend Mark Goodman. Mark has a phenomenal background in industry and manufacturing. He has spent his entire career in industry and manufacturing. Another thing I love about Mark is that he has walked the walk. He has lived and breathed the manufacturing environment, owning several manufacturing businesses, including an electric motor remanufacturing company. He is a Six Sigma black belt. He's had a great consulting career. He was one of the people that figured out how to tie statistical process control to technical training and use that to benefit organizations all over the world. He has a formal degree in education in this space, in instructional design and in organizational development. And Mark has developed comprehensive training companies or programs for some of the most recognizable companies in North America. Today, he is the Director of North American Industry Relations for Amatrol in Jeffersonville, Indiana, where he works with industries and employers across every sector, from automotive to food and beverage, pharmaceuticals, aerospace, mining, logistics, and others. When it comes to tying hospitality to hydraulics, to porting people from fast food to fabrication, from retail to robotics, Mark is the definition of a subject matter expert. Mark, it is so great to have you on the program, and welcome to our webinar today.
Hi, Matt. Thanks a lot. I sure appreciate you and Melissa inviting me to Webinar Wednesday. Exciting stuff.
Absolutely. And we are going to cover some great information for our listeners and for our viewers today. You're a phenomenal subject matter expert, and I'm going to dive right in to the questions that we have for you. The first one is, in this era of COVID, Mark, what are clients telling you about the difficulties in finding skilled talent, especially, as we said, given the COVID-19 situation?
Well, yeah, it's a really good question, Matt. And I want to kind of harken back to your comments relative to one of the slides you got up about where the new hires are actually coming from, because they're coming from a host of sectors outside of manufacturing. COVID has stressed numerous career opportunities, as you mentioned, in retail, hospitality, and restaurant industries. In fact, many of these businesses may not ever be able to reopen, thus creating the need for those employees to find work elsewhere. And just from what I see in the customer base that I have regular conversations with, there are tons of opportunities and openings in industry and manufacturing. So this means that the majority of those new hires are going to have no background in anything remotely related to manufacturing and need training that is at least very, very basic. Majority of my clients are telling me that they struggle with finding associates with the capabilities required to perform even some of the most basic plant floor responsibilities.
So some of the same things that we have heard from manufacturing employers literally over the last decade, the challenge of finding skilled workers, even in and maybe especially in the COVID era, is still a significant challenge. And then how they find those individuals and bring them up to speed in the world of manufacturing is the next biggest challenge. So what does someone who isn't from the manufacturing world, what do they need to do? What do they need to know to be successful in an entry-level position in advanced manufacturing?
Well, they've got to have a foundational understanding of what I refer to as manufacturing basics. Number one, how do plants operate? What are the general production metrics of the organization? And of paramount importance, what do we make and how do we do it? So when we look at trying to provide curriculum or learning content that supports that, we really look at basic mechanical and electrical as a tremendous payoff for these new associates, because literally everything within the plant is electromechanical. So a sound understanding of this is critical and matches directly to their assigned work tasks and subsequent success on the job. Things like mechanical transmissions, belts, pulleys, sprockets, chains, very, very important. Electric motors, how do they operate with diagnosis, replacement? So all of those need to become extremely routine for these new associates.
So they're accustomed to some of the types of processes and some of the types of business models that we would use outside of manufacturing, but becoming familiar with the specific manufacturing technology as it manifests itself in an advanced manufacturing environment is super, super important. Now, I think one of the challenges and one of the questions that a number of our viewers are going to have today, Mark, is, okay, fine, we've determined that these people have been dislocated out of other market spaces. We've determined that we need to train them around advanced manufacturing specific competencies. If I'm an industrial employer, where do I even start with that process? How do I get going?
This is a great question and one that I get asked routinely multiple times per day. And I want to stress that it is important not to assume that workers, either incumbent or new hires, are completely knowledgeable and capable of performing their assigned tasks. We have a common misconception that just because we posted a job and we hired someone for it, that they're going to know everything that they need to know. And what we're finding is this is simply not the case. Another tool that's used often is the use of some type of an assessment. An assessment can easily determine where each of these associates, again, new hire or incumbent, has knowledge and or skill gaps. And then training can be custom tailored to support and fill any of these skill gaps. It's been proven that by providing all of this background, the supporting information, knowledge regarding an industrial topic, followed by some type of hands-on practice, gets people up to speed very efficiently. I want to stress that simple is better here. In creating a clearly defined progression pathway that is measurable is going to pay huge dividends for the organizations. And associates really react well when plans are clear, plans are manageable, and the organization will definitely appreciate the increase in job readiness and positive improvements that they find within their own culture.
Perfect. So I know from experience, Mark, that you can talk for hours about all of the different competencies and all of the different important aspects of advanced manufacturing and how we train those literally from entry level all the way through highly advanced electromechanical technicians, automation technicians, and engineers. Can you narrow it down to maybe a handful of competencies? If we had to challenge you to say, what are those 4 or 5 competencies that are really, really important for people to learn in an entry-level manufacturing position, what would those 4 or 5 be?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say, what are those 4 or 5? I tend to keep it as simple as many digits as I have on one hand. And I always tell everybody I see everything from pickles to space rockets. And I find that though the products are drastically different, the competency needs are literally the same. So traditionally, I look at electrical, again, motors, control, wiring, troubleshooting, mechanical, all of the mechanical drive systems, tools, fasteners, lubrication, fluid power, that's going to cover both pneumatics and hydraulics, electronics, which are going to include variable frequency drives, PLC, HMI, and then automation systems. And there we're talking about smart systems, vision systems, and robotics.
And really figuring out where those manifest themselves in an individual employer's manufacturing processes, I know is one of the things that you're really, really adept at doing. The other thing I know you're really adept with is manufacturing technology and manufacturing business practices. And I can tell you from my 23 years of leading Midwestern manufacturing companies that if we wanted something to get better, we had to measure it. In fact, we talk incessantly, and many have used the same line, what gets measured improves, or what gets measured gets managed. When we talk about maximizing the value of training and engagement, what tools are you accustomed to using, Mark, to make sure an associate receives the absolute most value from their initial training and continues to stay engaged with the training program throughout their training process?
Well, for one, being able to put what they learned into practice almost immediately is extremely important. This ensures that the learner is able to get the required practice or repetitiveness that they're going to need, and also shows the learner that what they learned truly has value. This means that when asked to participate in additional training, they have a good perspective, and that the training, both prior and current, is important and valuable not only to them, but also the organization. And this helps them be more successful on the job. So providing a realistic performance standard is also a great tool. Let me try and put some brackets around that. For instance, maybe we don't need to pass everything with a 100% score, but 80% would be perfectly acceptable for whatever their current role is. For instance, safety content traditionally is looked at 100%, but we can look at having a machine operator be 80% of the way there, again, based on their current roles, and that can also be adapted over time as the associate gets more and more technically proficient. And then the ability to go back and remediate on areas that they need additional improvement works tremendously, very, very successful.
Our guest this afternoon is Mark Goodman. Mark is the Director of North American Industrial Relationships for Amatrol in Jeffersonville, Indiana. We are talking about how we port people from other segments of our economy, from hospitality, from retail, from every single other segment of the economy that is being disrupted and being dislocated in today's environment. We're getting some really, really good information. I know, Mark, one of the concerns that folks are going to have is if we bring these people over from those other industry segments, from the fast food segment, from retail, from hospitality, and we get them started in manufacturing, how do we keep them there? How do we know that we are going to benefit from this investment that we are making in training so that these people stick around and add value for their employees after the COVID crisis eventually winds its way down and we get back to some semblance of normalcy?
Yeah, great question, and obviously of significant importance both to the organization and the associates. These new skills and capabilities mean that an associate has the ability to encounter or be involved with new challenges. In my experiences, folks like challenges the best when they feel that they're adequately prepared. An example might be if climbing Mount Everest is going to be the challenge, the individual who's done lots of cardio and strength work will face the challenge quite differently from the individual who sat on the couch watching old movies and eating Cheetos. Most likely the new skills and capabilities acquired by these associates are going to propel them to higher pay levels, most likely higher than what they had in their old jobs. So again, in my experience, when you combine great pay, high levels of employee success and satisfaction on the job, and satisfaction with the direction and the culture of the organization, you get a very dedicated and loyal employee.
And I know firsthand, Mark, that reference to Mount Everest is actually a personal one to you. And in some other webinar, we'll have to sit down and talk about all your experience in climbing. Mark has just a tremendous and fascinating background in that endeavor as well. but excellent response in terms of how we retain our qualified talent after we have upskilled these individuals into fantastic entry-level positions in manufacturing. Remembering that entry level is just that is the starting point, and that manufacturing delivers all kinds of really rewarding opportunities for individuals throughout their career. Melissa, at this point in time, I think we'd love to turn the discussion over to the questions that have rolled in from the audience over the course of the last 20 minutes. I know we always get some great questions, so what have you seen pop up?
Sure. In just a second, I'll ask one of the questions that came in throughout the presentation. Just a quick reminder to those who are on live with us, you can use that Q&A button to submit your questions, and then we will read them and pose them to our panelists today. So we'll kick it off with this one. Mark, I'm going to direct this one to you. Someone submitted a question here that says, what is the key to implementing a successful training program at my company?
Oh, great question, and one that doesn't always have a singular answer. But I always start with in a singular place, and I will stress this as strong planning. It takes strong planning and the identification of a focus group. For instance, if you're going to begin training, who's the training for? What is the scope of the training? By scope, I mean, what are the core competencies involved with the tasks and responsibilities on the plant floor that are going to be conducted and performed by the associates? Most importantly, it needs to be measurable. Measurable for both ends of the spectrum. Organizationally, we want to make sure that the associates are getting something out of the training, and we want our associates to also recognize that they're moving forward and getting great benefit out of the training. It has to be timely. And when I say timely, obviously we need to fit the training to the timelines of our production, but more importantly, this ease to complete and the ability to provide milestones is important. For instance, if we tell somebody you've got 640 hours of training in order to move to a level 5 master technician, that's going to be a pretty hard pill to swallow. Whereas if we say, ultimately, that's going to be the goal, but let me break it down and show you the plan of how we're going to be able to get there, and you'll be able to measure yourself along the way, goes a long way towards satisfaction, again, both organizationally and for the associate. And then probably last, but definitely not least, is it has to be adaptable. It's got to be flexible. We're talking about a dynamic production environment, and we need to make sure that whatever we're doing as we measure, we're moving ourselves in the right direction. So again, focus group, scope, measurable, timely, and adaptable.
Oh, great answer, Mark. Thank you. Matt, I'm going to pose this next one to you. How can community colleges engage employers about the resource the colleges can be?
That's a phenomenal question, Melissa. And I can tell you as somebody that for, as I mentioned, 23 years was an industrial employer, that is a huge opportunity for both sides of the equation. It's amazing how many, especially 5 years ago or so, how many industrial employers were complaining about the fact that they couldn't find people, but yet we're not engaged with their local high schools. We're not engaged with their community or their technical colleges. We offer a couple suggestions. The first one is the biggest mistake that a community college or a technical college can make would be to think that the relationship is all about money. You know, we'll hear these stories about an industrial employer that made a significant grant or gift to a local community college. And everybody's like, well, I've got to go talk to my local industrial employers and ask them to do something similar. That is the result of a relationship. It is not the beginning, or for that matter, the end goal. So what we talk about is ask for help, not money. Your industrial employers, when asked, are ready to step up and eager to step up, to serve on advisory boards, to tour your facilities, to bring you and your students into their facilities so that you can begin sharing best practices. Admit that you don't speak each other's language. A PLC in manufacturing is not the same thing as a PLC in education. That's okay. Admit that right out of the blocks, and then people don't have to feel awkward about calling something the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing. It is all about that relationship, and then showing them the amazing things that are happening in our community and our technical colleges. I think many employers don't recognize the huge value that those institutions add to their local economy. So don't be afraid to make the phone call. Don't be afraid to make or ask for a referral. And when you sit down and get that meeting, ask for help and talk about how that industrial employer can support the efforts of the community college. That will lead to a relationship, and that will in turn lead to ways that we can together build great programs. Sometimes that's in the form of a gift of money. Sometimes it's in the form of a gift of expertise. Sometimes it'll take other forms, but start with the discussion and start with the relationship.
Wonderful. Thank you, Matt. And just to add to that, we did do a webinar a few weeks back on this topic. So since I'll be sending out this follow-up email, I'm going to go ahead and include the link to that webinar so that everyone who's on today, you can see more on that topic. Now here we have another really great question. Matt, I'm going to pose this to you. Mark, feel free to jump in as well if you have any additional thoughts. The question says, do you have any suggestions where and how to find prospective employees in service jobs, retail, et cetera, that might find a new career in manufacturing?
Boy, that's a really, really good question. I would say a few things. Number one is we've had tremendous success by just posting ads onto career boards and onto sites like Indeed. And it's amazing. You'll get 100 resumes, and maybe 2 or 3 of those are those diamonds in the rough, and maybe 97% of them don't fit. But I think that is a huge, huge opportunity. The other one is to connect with your local ETPLs, the workforce investment boards, that are doing training and training individuals to port into new segments of the economy. I think that's a really, really good way for folks to do it as well. And then Mark certainly would refer that one over to you if you've seen some best practices in terms of finding employees from other sectors.
Yeah, Matt, one of the things that I'm seeing trending across the country is job fairs. For a manufacturing organization to produce some advertising saying, hey, we're hosting live job fairs. This gives them the ability to really showcase their organization and the exciting attributes that are involved within the doors of the plant. They're being able to, via this means, show people that there's customer service, that there's robotics, that there's computer, there's IT, there's Ethernet, there's coding, programming, all of this stuff that many of these folks in these other sectors might have been doing as part of their job. They're now noticing, hey, that's a job function inside that plant. And I've always wondered what they've done in there. So that's one thing that I am seeing grow in popularity across the country, job fairs.
Excellent. Thanks, Mark, for that input. Matt, I'm going to turn things over to you to wrap it up. Looks like we're going to the end of our time here, and we don't have any more audience questions.
All right. Well, thank you, Melissa. And we're wrapping up right on time. Couple things. Number one, we've got some great webinars coming up for you over the course of the next several weeks. A week from today, on the 7th of October, I'll be joined by Mike Bigley. Mike is the superintendent of the Whitehall School District in Western Wisconsin. He has implemented, along with several others, a really, really fascinating approach to using technology in this era of distance learning, to where literally a teacher can be anywhere, at school, at home, somewhere else. A student can be anywhere, at school, at home, or somewhere else. And instruction can continue and does continue every single day, even in some cases across separate school districts. So a really, really innovative approach to distance learning. And a little bit of a spoiler alert, they had a whole contingency program around that need should things change in their school district. And I understand through the grapevine, they had to implement that contingency program within the last week. So that topic next week is going to be really, really timely. On the 14th of this month, I will be joined by the industry liaison for the National Center for Supply Chain Automation, the CEO of the Manufacturing Skills Standards Council, and the president of Amatrol for a discussion about how the entire supply chain is automating and what that means for the future of our workforce. And then finally, on the 21st of this month, October 21st, we will be talking all about metal 3D printing with a couple of the leaders of Exact Metal from State College, Pennsylvania. So you won't want to miss that webinar either. As always, I want to thank Melissa Martin for doing a phenomenal job of producing today's webinar, and especially thank my friend Mark Goodman for being a fantastic guest. So Mark, thank you so much for joining us. Melissa, thank you so much for our work. And finally, to our audience that comes back week in and week out to hear about best practices in STEM and technical education, thanks for joining us this week as well. We will see you next week, October 7th, for another edition of Webinar Wednesday.